I believe artificial intelligence and machine learning will become the greatest disruptive technology in parallel to the internet. People still cannot comprehend how profound the internet changed the way we talk, the way we live, and how businesses are built. So I believe we're at that very tipping point where this new revolution is going to take over.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Jesse Nyberg Podcast. Today we have on a talented designer, marketer, among a bunch of other things, the one and only Chris Doe. How you doing, man?
Doing great, Jesse. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. What have you been up to this week?
Well, I've been busy setting up my new studio. For those of you who haven't seen this before, this is all brand new. I no longer live on the west side. I've moved some 20 odd miles inland. So here I am.
Oh, okay. And have you gotten kind of adjusted to the new setup yet?
Yes. I think as humans, we adapt rather quickly. I remember the first couple of nights I was here because it's a pretty large lot. I was concerned about wild animals and things like that. But now I'm walking in the dark. I don't even care anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I always find that too. Like when I get into a new space, I'm very like uncomfortable, but almost in like a good uncomfortable, like it feels fresh. And then after like a week, you're already like, I could probably move another spot and it would feel like already fresh again. Like you get used to stuff so easily. And I feel like that can be a kind of a blessing and a curse sometimes.
Sometimes more a curse than a blessing. I think something that I used to hate as a young person is that we moved around a lot. Coming to America with not a lot of money, my parents worked really hard. And so every time they could, they would move us to a better neighborhood. So we moved from living with other families to living in a small apartment and then a home, and then just kept doing that. And so I didn't have the opportunity to get used to anything for very long. One of my greatest pains of growing up was, are you going to be my friend? Because I'm probably not going to see you in a year or two. And so I never got that sense of these are my roots, these are my people, because we would move. And keep in mind, this is pre everyone having a cell phone, pre-internet. And so it was hard to keep in touch with people. So moving just a few miles across town or whatever was like moving across the world to me. And I didn't like that because it made me very socially awkward. But then I realized now many years later that the reason why I run towards change versus running away from change so much is because change is part of my natural language.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because you would think like, I don't know, for me at least, I feel like a lot of the stuff that I grew up with that was maybe like a negative thing like that or something that I had to overcome. It feels like I've naturally went the complete opposite. Like I extremely go against that stuff. Like if I had to move around a lot, my type of personality, I'd be like, we're staying here forever now, like that's how I would look at it. But it's interesting to hear that you kind of leaned into that setting. What does like a normal day look like for you? Like on just a random Wednesday or something?
During the work week, I have a pretty regulated schedule. I try as much as possible to avoid context switching. So typically Monday is for writing, Tuesday's for reading, Wednesday is for calls, and Thursday and Friday are for production, like making content. And I was pretty good at maintaining this type of schedule until the pandemic hit, and then everything went out the door. But a typical day for me is I get up, usually when the sun comes up. For whatever reason, I can't sleep anymore, even though I hadn't had a lot of sleep the night before. I just get up. The internal biological clock is very strong. So it's typically around 6:30, 7 a.m. I'll get up and I'll spend anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour just reading all the comments from the different social channels, from LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever it is. I just read and respond because I want to know what people are feeling and saying and what the general sentiment is. And then I'll head into my office, which is really just another space in the house somewhere. And I'll fire up the computer, I'll blast through emails, and then I will just start thinking about what it is I need to do that day. Typically, for my schedule, I'm either doing a webinar, writing a talk, or preparing for a keynote somewhere. So there's a lot of thinking, reading, and writing while I'm doing other things. And so yesterday or today was a pretty prime example of that. I was up to 4 a.m. working on a keynote that I was giving today at 11:30. Wow. And then I got up at 7 to do a business boot camp call for an hour and a half. And you're my, I guess my second, or you're my third live call. And I have one more today, which is at 7:00. So oftentimes I'm recording content for people or with people. Like today I'm doing it for you. On different days, people are doing it for me.
Right. Okay. Is it easy for you to switch in between like those different modes of thinking, like going from having to record a video, let's say for your channel, and then the next hour you're like reading a research paper or something, and then the next hour maybe you're giving a talk that's live?
It is difficult. That's why I try my best to reduce the amount of context switching. So for the most part, my team protects my schedule for Mondays and Tuesdays. Usually I have nothing scheduled. And so if I don't feel like writing, then I'm reading or just thinking about whatever it is I need to do. They know that I need large blocks of time to be able to think clearly. And so if you're trying to come up with some really big idea or just to think about your life, you can't do it in an hour. You need to do it where you have long stretches of time so that you can come to some kind of conclusion. But the thing that I do love to do is I have a sketchbook and a notebook next to me always, and I'll jot down different ideas. If you were to go back, like some crazy demented fiend would have to go back and look at all my notebooks and they're like, wait a minute, didn't you already write this and say this? And I do find that I write and draw the diagrams over and over and over again. And you would think, well, a more organized person would just be able to scan that in, type it up, and never write it again. But I find that the act of writing is helping me to memorize and make it a part of who I am. And that practice has served me well for the last 20 plus years. So I'm going to keep doing that.
Yeah. They, like, even I remember the professors in college telling you like they wouldn't let you take notes on the laptop sometimes because they were saying writing it really makes you remember. And for a while I was kind of just like, I don't know about that. Like I like having it all in one place, but then you learn that it's definitely true. Like I've even gotten to the habit lately of, I have to give up my OCD of like keeping my stuff nice because when I read books now, I like writing all in the like margins and stuff because sometimes you read a book, especially like nonfiction, and it's really hard for me to even recall like any of it once I finish it. Yeah.
There's a difference. And if I heard the same thing that your teacher said to you, probably my natural default reaction is, you're just being an old timer. This is old fashioned. Yeah. This is super efficient for me to type because we can actually type much faster than we can write. But when you're typing, you're pushing things like this and it's not really internalizing. But the act of writing with your hand, you're retracing letter forms that you've come to memorize, since you learned how to write and read. And so it's recording it in the physical movements. There's muscle memory there that I think is being activated. I'm pretty sure there's been some science that backs up what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit ago that you spend some time going through all your channels to see like what people are thinking, like comments, emails and whatnot. Since you have like a fairly large, reach on the internet throughout your different things, does that ever, is it easy to stay like I know you want to stay and know what's going on, but is it hard to look at that stuff if like there's a lot of maybe like things that, let's say there's like negative stuff or stuff that you don't like to see, like, is it worth still looking at even if like the insights within there?
Yeah, actually, I believe the insights come from the edge cases. So let me talk about that. Of all the kinds of feedback that you can get, let's put on the polar end spectrum, people who really love you and tell you why and how you've helped change their life, and the people who really hate you and tell you why. Right. And why you're such a fool, you don't know what you're talking about, or you're some internet marketer, scammer kind of person. The ones in the middle tend to say like average things, and it's nice to be able to read, and it's also critical feedback in there. But the edge cases are really interesting to me because they feel the content the most. And if you're going to learn from the positive feedback, you're going to need to be there for the negative feedback. It's hard to say like you can only process and love the good stuff, because then that's some form of confirmation bias. You're only looking for the things that affirm what you already believe, which isn't really helpful in terms of developing you as a critical thinker and as a person who's going to continue to improve and learn as you go. So the negative feedback, believe it or not, And I'm cautious to say this because all of a sudden a bunch of fans were like, I'm going to leave a bunch of negative feedback all of a sudden.
Yeah.
But the negative feedback, it really fires me up. It fires me up in a way where I say to them, or I'm thinking in my mind, this person wants to learn, is a little bit confused, didn't like the way I said things, or I wasn't being clear. How can I be clear? How can I make this so that a person like this would be able to understand? And so when they push back, it's important for me because then I get to find another way of saying what it is I'm trying to say. And oftentimes that leads me to the best tweets or the social posts, because sometimes I write back, but I don't write directly to them. I write on a different platform, try and explain this. And I'll say something like, so for the people in the back, this is why you should not do this. And I'll find a different way of saying it. And so that kind of escalates the game a little bit. It brings a little more emotion to it. I find that tends to be the thing that resonates the most with people.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very that's how I think everyone would like to look at that stuff. You know, like I feel that way too. Like when I see negative things, especially when there's even if the approach is like rough, there's usually like a little nugget of truth in there. And that's when it hits you. You're like, they're right. Like I shouldn't have done it that way or whatever.
That's why it hurts a little bit.
Yeah. When it's like completely crazy, it doesn't affect you because you're like, in yourself that it's like nonsense, but
yeah. Like if they write in this person's a donkey idiot from outer space, there's quite literally nothing in there for me to work with. It's just a bunch of name calling. So if you strip out all the name calling, you just get this.
Right.
And that's it. So I can't do anything with that. But it's usually the person who's like, this idiot isn't always talking about because of X, Y, and Z. And this is an old idea being repackaged. I'm like, okay, fair enough. It is an old idea being repackaged. Sue me. I'll tell you right now, I don't have any original ideas. All my ideas come from something I've read, watched, something that someone else has told me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, because sometimes when I'm creating, not necessarily like my design work, but like videos or stuff for YouTube, and sometimes I'm explaining something that either is like an amalgamation of things I've read and learned, like you said, I sometimes feel insecure, like I'm not allowed to be like, I'm telling you this because it wasn't my original thing. But then if you put it that way, it's hard to really figure who made up really anything unless you go way back to like some old philosophers or something.
Yeah. You'd have to go back to some really ancient source code to be able to trace the genealogy of an idea. And I think you could do that if you want, but it's a lot of energy spent on doing that. What I think a healthier, more productive way of looking at this is we are literally a synthesis of two people, your mom and your dad. Right? Yeah. So already your source code is from some other source. And then the language that you've learned, if it's English or Japanese or Chinese or Spanish, that was also invented by someone else, by a community, a village of people came together to agree that these sounds would represent these concepts. And we're building on that over and over again. And is there a point to us trying to reinvent what was already invented and put together? So I think in this life, in this kind of mortal coil that we're in, is we're trying to synthesize ideas from disparate sources and to find the connection between those things. And sometimes we can create something that might be labeled as new. That's all we're doing.
Yeah. Well put. This a little bit switch here. I wanted to ask you something. So I think ever since I was in university, like I was watching some of the stuff you did with the Futur stuff and all these things, but I wasn't aware of you old enough to know like kind of what was going on before that. And I was curious if you could just give me like a quick little background on what type of like design work and specific, like when you were just a designer, you were doing before you kind of took on this whole like marketing, multidisciplinary business that the Futur is.
Sure. I went to a traditional, I went to a really good private art school and studied graphic design to do traditional design. And so when I graduated from school, I pursued something called motion graphics, which was a nascent field and industry at that point. The term hadn't even been invented when I was doing it, right? And I was making commercials and music videos at first for no-name clients, super obscure things, but eventually you earn your way up into getting the trust and attention of big agencies. So we were working with GWT, TWA Shy Day, working with the biggest ad agencies in the world, with some of the biggest brands in the world. And so we had done that since 1995. And I evolved from being a traditional print designer, working with typography, logo design, and editorial layouts, to doing moving type on a screen, animating logos, animating characters, and evolution would continue on all the way into shooting pure live action with no graphics, just telling stories visually. And it's a long arc. I don't want to say it like it happened overnight. This is a multi-year process of evolving as a creative person. And right towards the end, we evolved into the next iteration, which was to be a branding and marketing agency working with clients direct. One of our biggest clients, Hudson Pacific, is I think at that time, a $13.5 billion corporation doing commercial real estate development. That was one of our bigger clients. We also did work for Xbox, the console, for their agency, at that time, still their agency, the Eisenberg Group in Pasadena. So those are some of the things that we worked on.
That's cool. Yeah, because like you have so much stuff in your like now, like what Christo is now, that it's almost hard to like go back and figure out like your relationship with blind and like you as a designer and stuff, you know?
Yeah. If people are morbidly curious, they would just type in Christo and type in the word blind, and then you're going to see hundreds, maybe 1,000 different links to the things that we used to do.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
When you first got into like the content stuff, and I know, I think it says on your LinkedIn, like in 2014, like my friend urged me to get into content and stuff like that. When you first did that, did you have like this strategy like built into that initial idea that it would become something this large, or were you kind of just testing the waters and then it all went out from there?
A little bit of the second one, but not fully. So I didn't have a grand plan. I was teaching at that point almost 15 years at a traditional school, at the school that I went to, teaching sequential design, conceptual thinking, the things that I had learned on my own and the things I'd learned in school. And I always thought of myself as a teacher. I just didn't find it to be lucrative to pursue a career in teaching. So I was running some workshops trying to teach people, and I found it to be quite difficult to get the word out. Like, I know I can teach this. I know I can help you. And the people who come to work for me, my interns, my staff, they know they're a testament to my teaching ability because they grow really fast. Like many of our interns who start at the lowest position wind up being creative directors at our company or at some other company. And so I already knew I could do this. And so when Jose enters into my life, he's like, let's make YouTube videos. I'm like, why would we do that? It seems like the dumbest idea. He goes, well, people need to find out about what it is that we're doing. And there's this great platform. It's free. We could use it and we could build up authority and expertise. And I was like, I'll help you. I'll record the videos because I know how to make commercials. We have all the gear, and you stand in front of the camera. You do your thing, because he was a very talkative, gregarious, extroverted person. He's super bright, right? So he could speak about anything. If you just gave him a prompt, he would start talking about it. He goes, no, I'm not doing this without you. I said, yeah, I'm going to help you. He goes, no, you need to do it with me in front of the camera. We'll get someone else to shoot. You don't need to direct from behind the scenes. That was a very uncomfortable and strange concept for me, that I would actually be in front of camera. Now, keep in mind at this point, so in 2014, this is almost, I guess this is 19 years after starting my business, right?
Okay.
I've only spent time on this side of the lens, not in front of it, the way we're doing right now. So when we started rolling camera, I had a difficult time even saying my name. Like, he would introduce himself and then he would look at me and I'd say, my name is okay. And okay, let's do that again. Let's do it again. And we would like do 5 takes just so I can say my name, introduce the company, what it is that I do. The most basic fundamental thing, tongue-tied, super self-conscious. And that was just an evolution at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny hearing you say that, because you do so much of that. It's like, it's good to hear that though, because it means that you weren't like this skilled public speaker right from the get-go. Because I remember, I'm nowhere near like as polished as I would like to be, but I remember when I first started making YouTube videos and stuff, I would get so like frustrated from messing up, and you just get like hotter and hotter, and you start to get like sweaty and nervous, and it's just like you get that. Nothing like being in front of the camera makes you feel like, is this even worth it compared to any other like type of thing, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. When you first did the Futur stuff, was anyone really creating like educational content or video content at all about like design outside of like the traditional school systems?
I don't think there were many. And if there were, I apologize to all of you. I wasn't aware of them. The kind of people who are creating content on YouTube teaching things about design or how to run a creative business were people who didn't know how to design, who didn't know how to run a creative business, oddly enough, right? So one of the reasons why I stayed away from making YouTube content was because I saw a bunch of young people who were kind of photogenic, who seemed to like the attention that they were getting by recording content. But I would listen to them and they're using the wrong terms. I could tell like they're not using the tools correctly, and it was just messing me up. Like, I don't want to be associated with these people. But I don't know who said this to me before, but you're allowed to complain one time. And it's like, what does that even mean? What that means is if you don't like something and you keep finding that it to be a problem, you either shut up and deal with it or you do something about it. So I have to exercise that kind of discipline to say, like, I'm not going to talk trash anymore. I'm done. And so until I start recording content and trying to teach people, I will never know what it's like to try and teach online. And now that I do, I realize all kinds of mistakes that I make. And people will have fun at me. And I'm like, fun poking at, like, you don't know how to draw 25% of a circle. You know, when you're sitting there trying to think of like what the heck you're going to say next and you draw, you're like, I don't know what 25% looks like this. Obviously it's a quarter of the pie, but you know, you're not that smart in that moment.
I feel like the hardest part I think about creating content when it comes to like design is if you're explaining something or if you're actually doing like design, like a tutorial or like some kind of process work. It's so much harder than creating content about anything else because you also have the pressure of making sure the design element of the thing looks good. Like, you're not only having to explain something well, but you're like, I hope this looks good too, because then it kind of ruins some of the credibility of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And do you like nowadays that you have so many different people involved with the Futur and it's like a lot more of this large kind of media company, how do you decide on what you want to be like the face for and what other stuff you want to delegate to like around the team?
Very good question. I encourage the team to make as much content with me as they can, but many of them don't want to, never desire to do it, or perhaps don't have the skill or the language skills that we're talking about, right? Because it takes time to hone this craft to be able to think about what it is that you want to say and say it in real time and be responsive. It's not an easy thing. It's one of the reasons why I would encourage, if there are any parents listening to this, is to get your children involved in making content for YouTube, if nothing else, but to help build their self-confidence and their ability to communicate to others in mass. And I think that's really important. And so I tend to be the most prolific content creator of the entire group. There's 20 of us. There's a handful of people who help me make content, but they're not usually on camera. Every once in a while they are, and it's brilliant. And I think they're wonderful for doing it. But it takes them months to make one video, whereas we don't have that kind of luxury. I'm cranking out content on a much faster clip than them. And so for me, as an entrepreneur, forget about making content for YouTube. You have to look at the roles that you need to play that are essential to your business moving forward. Essential, as in no one else could possibly do this but you. And then what you do is you need to shed away everything else. And so I have a great team who is my support network so that I get to read comments for an hour and a half that I can spend a whole day reading and another day writing if that's what I wish to do. And so Ben Burns runs the company for us. He makes sure all the partnerships are taken care of. He vets the new deals. He delegates tasks. He does the stand-up meetings with them on Mondays. He follows up on tasks, hires and fires people. So he's running the company. Like, if you didn't know any better, you would say, like, he's the entrepreneur, he owns the company, but he runs it as if he does, so that I get to be the creative person who just sits there and thinks, what do we need to do next?
Yeah. Was it easy for you in the beginning when you first started having to delegate like that? Because I find it hard to practically delegate anything to anybody because I'm worried it won't have the same level of quality.
Yeah. I may be unique in this aspect, but I find that doing something over and over again is very repetitive and not a good use of my brain. And so what I like to do is to figure out how to do the things that no one else wants to do or can do. And that typically falls into client development and building relationships and the larger strategic vision. Because in order to do that, you have to stay abreast of a lot of different things, and you have to be in this kind of hot zone with the client, which a lot of people don't, want. They want to be the person on the box doing the creative work and fine tuning the design. And standing in front of the clients and speaking to them is the last thing that they want to do. And so when I just started, what I did was, and I was very fortunate to have this happen, is I got more opportunities than I could do. So I just did a little light networking, and then I got work, and work was coming my way. And I was thinking, okay, if the client is willing to pay me this, and so here's an example. If the clients were willing to pay me $50 an hour to do something, in the beginning I charged hourly, didn't know any better. And then if I can call one of my friends from school and say, look, you're not doing anything. How much would you charge me to do this kind of work? They would say $30 an hour. I'm like, super, you're hired, come on in. And so what happened was I would give them the work, brief them on what the clients told me. And so I'm also doing a level of filtering, saying, you know, of all the things the client said, these are the 3 things we need to solve for, and use your skill. And they would design, and they would work on it all day long. At the end of the day, we would get together and like, show me the work that you're doing, and I would give them feedback. So now I'm moving into art direction, and I'm doing this at 22 years old, right? So it's not like I'm waiting for some magical thing to happen. And art direction really is, here's where you're at. Here's what we promised the client. I need help you get to that point and beyond, if possible, using words. I don't want to put my hands on the mouse unless it's absolutely essential. And so I would talk to them about their design, what they need to do, tweak, balance, scale, contrast, proportions, those kinds of things. Or perhaps there's a discarded idea that they didn't take to the finish. And I would see something, the germ of an idea, and I would say, you know what, let's go back into that. There's something fascinating here. Here's what I'm seeing. And they was like, oh, I didn't see that myself. And they would work on it. So that's also the role of a teacher. So I like to tell people today that an entrepreneur, a true entrepreneur, is really an educator, not a micromanager. So I'm not there to micromanage my people. I'm there to educate them, to make them self-sufficient, and to be able to do things autonomously and self-directed.
Yeah, that's good. Do you ever feel like, since what you do gets further and further away, like you said, of like having your mouse or your hand on the mouse and doing like the actual design work, do you ever feel like you miss that kind of, or just want to be like, maybe not at that same level as you were in the past when you were designing, but get some more, like, kind of get back into the weeds of it, or whatever you want to call it?
I don't really miss it in the way that I think other people would miss it, in that I think when you learn fundamental skills in design, they don't go away because you get older. The tools do change, they do get more powerful, and there's different ways of doing the same thing. And I'm not so concerned about that, right? Some of the designers and illustrators I admire the most are still on Illustrator 97 or whatever. Because they refuse to upgrade. They don't want to pay the prices, but they love the tool. And the things that they can do with an old tool that's like 10, 15 years old, and they can run circles around some of the young kids graduating from school today who have all the tools in the world. And an expression I like to say is, the tool doesn't make the artist makes the tool. We need to understand the difference between that. So for me, the thing that I want to be the best at is in my conceptual thinking, the ability to see the problem, to solve complex things, and to be able to communicate big ideas simply. And that's the tool that I want to work on the most. I don't want to worry about like, okay, there's a new Illustrator plugin to make the drawing look like a crosshatch illustration. Some young person can do that. And that's their value because they get excited. And I was there at one point. I'm not there today. And the other thing about this is I haven't literally like not designed anything in years. I design our thumbnails. I design my keynote presentations. So I get the luxury of being able to focus my energy on designing the things that only matter to me, right? Like yesterday, I'm working on this presentation. I'm using Midjourney and Photoshop to composite things together using neural filters because I have the time to like poke around and say, you know, I wonder how you could use this thing. Oh, that's fascinating. I could watch the tutorial. And then what I can do, at least back in the old days, pre-pandemic, is if I would learn a new tool or a new way of compositing something or way to color correct, I would then wait for the opportunity when one of my team members was struggling with something. I'm like, there's another way to do this, and I'm going to show you how. Let me try and remember where it is that I saw this. So I'm also connecting dots for them. And I remember very distinctly many years ago, we were working on a music video for the Ravenettes, and they're scrambling looking for high definition footage of clouds because the composite needed it. And I'm like, hold on. I'm going to show you something I learned from Andrew Kramer, Video Copilot. It's going to blow your mind. It uses a static image and how he's able to make it look like a moving cloud. And I showed them how to do it using a corner pin effect. And they were just blown away. Like, why would we ever use stock footage of a cloud again? Because we take any static image and make it look as if it were an actual cloud moving. And those moments are when I feel like, yes, this is what I was supposed to do, to learn the things that they don't have time to learn because they're in the trenches, and share it with them at the appropriate time.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's definitely a nice work smarter, not harder approach to things. You mentioned designing presentations and keynotes and stuff. Do you think you're kind of responsible for the entire like Instagram infographic trend? Basically that style that we see.
If we're talking about the same thing, potentially I'm one of a few people who influence a lot of other people to do the Instagram carousel posts a very specific way in terms of the typefaces that I use, the style of writing, and the color palette, and the juxtaposition of image and type. Right. I don't know who was doing it before me. I'm sure somebody was, but I'm not telling you I'm doing anything new. I'm just doing it on Instagram. And then people are seeing my account grow. And then therefore what people do is they imitate what they like, right? So that's what happens.
Okay. Yeah. Cause there was a good few years where it was like, I couldn't really see anything else for a while, it was like the Instagram reels of like 2000, maybe like 19 and 20 or something like that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts overall, like at some of the state of like social media and the connection to like designers? What do you think is the most important social media that people that do design or creative careers should be kind of putting their time into, considering there's been a lot of changes over the years in them?
Yeah. So what happens is the algorithms change, and they're in constant competition with one another, one platform versus another. And they're all trying to do the same thing. How do we keep you on the platform as long as possible? And so first, you can see it quite clearly. Instagram began with static images, one image. And then they would allow you to link together 3 images, a mini carousel. And then they rolled out this thing where, 3 images works. Why not give you 10? Because if you think about it, a side swipe is worth 10 swipes vertically, right? So somebody's sitting there reading and trying to connect the dots. So like, this is great. They tried and failed a little bit with IGTV, trying to like do video because they couldn't figure out how to do it. I think they tried to emulate what YouTube was doing, but people who want YouTube content go to YouTube. And so that was a crash and burn. And then out of nowhere, this little company called ByteDance creates TikTok as a vertical video sharing platform. And they are just crazy good at writing the algorithm to understand what people want to see and to understand there's a whole nother visual language in creating 30 or 60 second clips. And a new group of creative people understand this and are loved by the algorithm. And so all of a sudden they see like, my gosh, if somebody's only swiping a couple of times, that's only worth this amount of time. But if somebody's literally watching something for 60 seconds, we have them for 1 minute. And then the algorithm shows them another video. And then you're like, okay, oh my gosh, I'm just watching more and more videos. And I say this in all seriousness. TikTok, highly, highly addictive. I go to TikTok, I want to check something on my profile or change something. And on my way to the supermarket, if you will, the market to sell the cow, I'm running into videos and I forget what the heck I was going to do there. So 15, 20 minutes later, I'm like, oh shoot, I need to change my profile. Okay, I click on my profile, right? Because the For You feed is nuts on how good it is. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here's another one. And it's just showing me what it is. It knows I want to see more of, and it's learning really fast. So what happens is then Instagram responds to this, says, we are getting our lunch eaten by this other young upstart and we can't rest. So what they do is they have to counter balance or counteract what they're doing by training their algorithm and saying, and it's been said from the CEO, we're focused on videos moving forward. They cannot lose this war because the attention graph is moving away from them and then they're going to hurt. So what they have to do, and this is really interesting, when platforms mature, they stop working so hard for you, the creator. You know that. Right. They take you for granted because they're like, we're the dominant, we're the 800-pound gorilla. We don't care if you find a new audience or if you make money at all. And what have you seen recently in the last couple of weeks and months? Paying creators for views, right? And they're also pushing out your content to more people to help you grow your audience faster. So I have a bunch of friends that are part of my community and they create content and they were stuck at like 5,000 to 10,000 followers each. And like, how do you get to so many followers? And then in the last month and a half, I have one friend in particular, she's almost at 100,000 followers. She's growing so fast. Whereas me, I have 800,000 or so followers. My following has really slowed down because I think Instagram understands, like, I'm already connected. I'm hooked in. What do I need 2 more followers for? But they're going to redistribute the love. So what you'll see in your timeline is this. Instead of seeing the content in which you follow, you're going to see 40 to 60% of content from people you don't follow at all. And that's giving opportunity to new people to grow. And this is important. So to answer your question,
go ahead.
What platform should you be on? You should be on the platform where your community, your audience, your clients are most likely to be on. And the answer is going to be different for each person. For some people to be on LinkedIn, Twitter, especially if you're doing NFT projects. Some people to be on Discord.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think there's something to that because I have like 55, I think, on Instagram, and my reach and stuff has been pretty equivalent to the amount I got at like 10 to 20K. But from like 5 to 10 or 10 to 20, it felt like exponential. Like they were just like plugging me everywhere, and it felt like, and I see a lot of the people I know blowing up and like doing well on these platforms, and they're usually around that same like 12 to 30K like zone. And it seems like that's kind of the sweet spot for like Instagram to be like, you prove that you're like trying and we're going to give you this boost, but then it's really hard to keep up the momentum once you get into those like larger numbers I've seen.
Yeah. And I didn't understand this before, but I had a couple like friends who were in the million, just cracked 1 million followers. Yeah. And they would say like, I don't know why I can't grow beyond this. I'm like stuck at 1 million. And they've been there for a really long time. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Maybe you need to make more content. So as I'm approaching 1 million, I'm like, oh shoot, the brakes have been pumped. I think it's a sign of a couple of different things. One is how many more new things are you going to be able to say, right? Because maybe you've said it all at this point. And 2, have you reached a saturation point? Has everybody who's wanted to follow you for this thing followed you already? And unless you do something very broad, like some celebrities do, some really broad topics that it's kind of universal.
Right, or comedy or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But if you're talking about like, say, logo design, because I know many people in the logo design space, like, yeah, we've seen it. We already follow you. Is there more? Okay, so I still follow you. That's fine. And that's kind of maybe the part of the problem.
That's a good point. Yeah, that was one of my main concerns with just doing anything with design that's more content based rather than like posting just my work, was that what's the audience? Like, is it just anyone that follows like the Futur already? Are you guys the max like saturation that there is, or is there like more beyond this that can be tapped into, and it's just that there's not enough collective people all doing it? Because I really do believe in the rising tides like lifts all ships type thing, because I've seen as the more creators that do design and digital art and things like that on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, it seems to directly boost some of the stuff I'm doing, especially when they're working within the same topics and stuff. Like, the past few weeks, everyone's making videos about like Midjourney or the DALL-E AI stuff. And, it's kind of like a easy one right now, but you see like everyone's thing just slowly come up together because it's a hot topic. And so, segueing into that, I guess I wanted to ask you mentioned it a little bit. What are your overall kind of thoughts on the AI stuff? I've seen you talk about a little bit on LinkedIn, but curious if you could elaborate.
Yeah. So I'm working with some writers right now to do a box style documentary on my thoughts on AI and what you have to be prepared for. So here I'll go on record. And one of the things I was going to say to you is this is, before I answer your question is, and I asked this question in a very genuine, earnest way, not to try to get some fluff here, but do you know of an account that does what we do that is bigger than my account?
Then like you or the Futur?
Like my account, not the Futur's account.
Chris Doe, 800 you said?
Yeah, I'm about 850.
On Instagram
something.
At least, right?
Yeah, on Instagram.
Probably not. I think especially since you're more in the marketing, you're able to capture the pure design like enthusiasts, the art people and the marketers. I think a lot of people don't have all three. They're either the art, the design, or the marketing, and no one wants all of just those one things. So
right.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
That's
I can't think of one.
Right? So you were saying like it has the market reach a certain point in which I cannot reach more people because I'm already at the top, and what else is there to get, right? At some point we're going to find this out. And this is inevitably what happens to thought leaders and influencers. They start out with a core message, with a core audience, and they reach saturation point. And in order for them to reach more people, they have to go a little bit broader and broader. So you see people like Tony Robbins speak about concepts and he has millions of followers. You see Gary Vaynerchuk, the same thing. He might have started out with a very specific audience and he's getting broader. He's talking about kindness and empathy and being a good human. And that's a competitive advantage because why? Because he understands that as well. In order for you to continue to grow, you reach broader and broader audiences by doing that. So sometimes in getting a bigger audience, you alienate that core audience who says, man, we were there with you at the very beginning. And now it seems like you're talking about air and water, right? And it doesn't mean anything, but that's the evolution. So we kind of have to find a way to evolve as creators to hold on to our core community while growing and expanding. And so some people do get upset at that. All right, let's get back to your question here. Can you repeat your question real quick?
I don't think it was I guess it was more of a statement. I wanted your comments on just your, we were talking about the
AI and Midjourney
AI stuff, right?
Yeah. So I was started off by saying, I want to go on record by saying this and maybe I'll be proven wrong, is I believe artificial intelligence and machine learning will become the greatest disruptive technology in parallel to the internet. People still cannot comprehend how profound the internet changed the way we talk, the way we live, and how businesses are built. So I believe we're at that very tipping point where this new revolution is going to take over. We can see in talks done by Andrew Yang, who talks about just look at AI machine learning as how it's going to replace the trucking industry. It's going to replace or displace tens of thousands of truck drivers, and they're going to have anything to do. And so, as artists, should we be concerned? Yes, we should totally be concerned. Should we be scared? Absolutely not. There's nothing that you can do that's going to stop this from happening. What you can do is you can learn how to use these tools, and they are tools right now. And this is temporary because I don't know how sentient these things get really fast, right? But if you think about it, you're already the beneficiary of machine learning. You just didn't know what it was because there was a layer, an interface that you were familiar with. A lot of things that are built into Photoshop now are built on machine learning. For example, a tool that I love and I use a lot is the auto masking tool. I don't know about you, but cutting something out, especially complex things, it would take me hours to do. It's painstaking, horrible work to do. And it's not something that humans should be using. This is not good use of human capital. And so they have trained the machine to recognize what faces are, the difference between hair and a branch and a cloud. And so it just intelligently gets you really, really close. And it's getting better every single day. Nobody's complaining about like, all the people who did rotoscoping, they're going to be displaced. Most of us creative people think that's not a good use of your time. Do something else with your life, right? So we understand that. We also see things from Adobe called neural filters, which it can change the lighting and the season of a landscape. Like, holy cow, how does it even do that? How does it take something in autumn and push it to winter or to turn it into a desert scene? It's not perfect, but it's freaking really good, right? Or it's something that de-ages you naturally or ages you in the opposite direction. These are all programs that are trained to understand faces and eyes and what happens to you over time. So what we're seeing I think is a potential entirely different field of study, and a way for you to have a job. I believe there will be AI jockeys. So they're interpreters of understanding the machine and the language, and they also live between the technology and creative people. So I'm seeing people produce amazing works of art using AI, and we'll probably put produce in air quotes because, like, you know, who's doing it, authorship issues aside, that I don't know how to do. I just don't know what prompts you talk to the machine or you use to generate that image. I would rather just hire you. Right. So I could say to some young person living in some remote part of the world, say, I need 15 concepts for a restaurant design that has these themes in it. And then this person takes human language and human intention and turns over to the machine and says, you know, imagine restaurant, blah, blah, blah. And they in the style of, and using this lighting and that kind of lens. And they're speaking the language the machine understands. And they can kick out 50 images. And then they curate that down, and then they deliver that, and they're paid not for their time. They're not paid for their effort. They're paid for the result. I asked for 15 ideas. These are 15 ideas. It's so on the money. And so there will be this new field of creative class where some AI jockeys are better than others because their understanding of words, art history, and how the machine thinks and works is better than the other person. Just like there are some people who can paint a better matte painting than others because of their skill set. And so we're going to see this layer in between. And of course, okay, the question is going to be, what happened to all the concept artists? What happened to all the compositors? They're the ones who are going to be in trouble if they don't become these people who are able to talk to the machine. My thing is, if you don't control the machine will then control you. You need to tell it what to do. So last night, I'm working on some Mid-Journey generated images. They're not exactly what I want. And instead of sitting there trying to come up with the exact prompt and waste hours, I just took one render, took another render, cut, composite, put them together. I got exactly what I wanted. I fixed parts of the road, the background, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, I think there will be something like that. Yeah, like the jockey or whatever you want to call them. Because when I made a video about the Mid-Journey stuff, I got like close to what I was going for, but yeah, like if I have found anything from the experience and messing with this stuff is that the prompt like conception or whatever you want to call it, like thinking of how to word things is like in an art form in itself, because
it is.
Even when someone told me like, yo, you have to put like Unreal 8K, whatever, like even doing that like made stuff look so much better. And it's like, I would have sat there forever trying to do it in the same like cartoon style or whatever and never fully got to the point I wanted. Do you think though, like you said, maybe concept artists or things like that are maybe the most at risk because it's kind of directly competing with what they do? Do you think that replacement like time is short from now? Like, do you think that's going to happen soon, or is that a while down the road?
I think it's going to happen really soon if it's not already happening now. So something I noticed in the short time I've been using it, Jesse, is that the machine is getting better every single day. So in the beginning, I was interested in doing graphic versions of Marvel characters, Marvel superheroes. And when I first typed it in, it was giving me garbage, right? Like, shoot, okay, they're pretty abstract. I love the design and the aesthetic, but it's not looking like the person I want it to look like. 30 days later, I type in the same prompts again. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gotten so much better now.
Right.
This is incredible. And that's 30 days. So is it Moore's law who says like technology doubles in power every so many months, right? And futurists, what they do is they try to predict the future by saying, I'm not going to be limited by my understanding of patterns from the past, because things happen so quickly, exponentially fast, that you have to keep constantly thinking, what is the bigger idea? So I don't think it takes a genius to see AI is producing really great concept art right now. Who's in trouble? Concept artists, because it's only going to get better. It's going to understand context and nuance, and you won't have to type in Octane 8K anymore. You'll just say real or illustrated or something, and it will know at that point. Not right now, but it will, because it has a lot of humans training it. Every single person who's using it is teaching the software, whether you know it or not, what to do and what is good and what is bad, right? It's built into the platforms themselves. So I think, like say for example, there's going to be a Star Wars Part 15, and they need designs for the next stormtrooper, or some kind of robot assassin hunter, and you're a concept artist. The old way is I'm going to do some pencil sketches. I'm going to work through the problem. The new way is you're going to type in a bunch of variables, and it's going to kick out for you 15 or 5,000 ideas for as fast as you can work, right? And then you, as the concept artist, get to decide aesthetically, I like this more than this, and I want to combine these two. And then what you'll probably do is do a photo bash, and you'll bang those things together, and then you'll come up with an idea that then you can present to your client. It was like, wow, these are really interesting ideas. The thing about AI that I'm really impressed with is that it doesn't do things that humans would do. I think a robot head has eyes, nose, mouth, and it's all this way, right? And then it clusters 8 eyes on the top or on the bottom by the jaw. It dislocates things and it does weird things. And I think it's just a happy accident that I hope we don't lose. But that really opens up like, oh, I never really thought of it like that. Or to include organic versus machined materials. I'm like, wow, that is really cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I remember I was doing some kind of prompt with like something with a brain like splitting in half or something. And instead of the brain being how you would think, like either in a like an X-ray thing or pink, it was like translucent and like almost like neochrome. And it's like I wouldn't have ever really went with that direction. And it had like a thin layer of like plasma around it or something or the other. And one thing I'm kind of curious about that I've seen people talk about, and I don't know if there's even a way to clearly define it, but the way that AI is like pulling from art that exists like in the world and stuff, like the licensing issues and like copywriting and all that, do you think we're going to start seeing a lot more like maybe cases pop up of like maybe like suits or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a really good argument that a lot of creators bring up, but it's a thinly veiled argument, and I'll tell you why. When you are like a working professional, tell me if you've ever been guilty of this, okay? When the clients are like, we need a new direction, and you say, oh, is it a little bit like a Picasso meets a this? What are you doing right there? You're doing what the AI is doing. You're photo bashing things together conceptually, right? So like, yeah, it is kind of like Picasso's blue period plus that, but more realistic, okay? And so what do? You go back to the studio, you go and Google Picasso blue period, and then you Google the other thing, and you look at it and you synthesize those things into something. Well, are you concerned as an artist right now that people are doing that? So far, I've not heard anybody cry about that, because this is happening all the time. When you design a logo, when you design a website, when you design an interior, what are you doing? You're cutting and pasting together different references and sources to come up with a bespoke solution for a very specific client's needs. The machine is just doing the same thing, okay? Now, I've seen creative professionals use too much of an original source material, and they do get in trouble. Let's just look at the music industry. When you sample certain notes, like Vanilla Ice with David Bowie's song Under Pressure, right? It clearly, that was derivative, but he argued it was not. And everybody listening to him like, no, you really did. So you just need to pay the man. So there will probably be another layer of AI that helps to deconstruct images and say, this passes the score or it does not. And so the machine is not going to kick out something that can be legally taken to court and say, this is 70% unchanged, therefore we have a problem. So the AI is studying images in different styles, and it's doing a synthesis, a mashup of many different things, not unlike what a human being would do. So if you don't have a problem with humans doing it, why all of a sudden concern with AI? Probably because at the scale at which it could do, right? And also we're putting very powerful tools in front of people that I think creative people would say, you're not allowed to play and use these crowns. Well, I don't think that makes you look very good. I think that makes you look really ugly to say, well, it should be only for people who've trained this way and done this thing. You're being an elitist. You're being a traditionalist. And I think that's the opposite of what it means to be an artist.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. Cause we pretty much do that, but it just at like a way less efficient, kind of rate.
We're just angry that it's more efficient than us.
Yeah. It's definitely like, that was like one of the best, I'd say probably, arguments I've heard for that, because I think a lot of people, when they hear this issue, like it's hard not to come at it like emotionally and like from a fear-based perspective where you want to be this designer, this artist that's successful like it was back in the day. But yeah, that's a good point.
I'll give you another example here, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shepard Fairey. Do you like Shepard Fairey's work? Obey, Giant, the whole bit?
Yeah. I liked a lot of his older stuff for sure.
Yeah. And so do you know his source material? And he's gotten into a lot of hot water in terms of potential copyright infringement using AP photographs of Obama and things like that. But I'm not offended by the Obama thing. I'm more offended by the Russian constructivists who came way before him, who he's emulating the textures, the colors, the scale, everything from the Bauhaus. And you can look at an original layout and look at his thing. It's like, whoo, this barely passes the test. Right. Yet he's a celebrated artist and more power to him, right? I'm not concerned about that. But if we're okay with artists doing it, artists, quote unquote, what's the problem? Andy Warhol would do paintings of the Campbell soup can. And he would have an art factory of assistants working on things. And screen printing as a mechanical way of reproduction is not the artist's hand. So he would have people draw or cut ruby litho and ink acetate. They would produce a silk screen. They would pull the screens and he would say yes, and he would sign it. So he was the ideas person. So do we have a problem with that?
Right. It's same with Koons or like Tom Sachs, like that builds these crazy machines. Like they have like the labor people doing a lot of the actual construction of the items, and they're more coming up with just the ideas. I always felt that there was some weird difference though between, even if it's just like an unspoken thing in my mind or everyone feels this way, but between design and art, like artists have a lot almost more like precedent from the past of people breaking the rules that they think that they're more allowed to, because design has always been a lot more like rigid, and it's like, you do this, you don't do this, you can't do this, you know?
Well, I think there's a combination of things. As an artist, you have a lot of leeway in terms of what can be considered art. For example, Mickey Mouse is a fairly recognizable character, a strong silhouette that Disney will defend if you do weird things. However, if you're an artist making limited edition pieces of work that are expression of your creativity, it seems like you can get away with murder. It's when you start to move into mass-produced goods. So if I'm the same person, I use the exact same image, but I make a backpack out of it and mass-produce this, Disney's attorneys will come down on my neck, right? It's because they're like, you know what? You're not allowed to do that. That's a violation of our intellectual property. So we're going to sue you, and you're going to lose everything that you have. But that's a difference. See, so graphic designers in general are doing something for a client. It's not an expression of who we are. We're not trying to make one or two pieces of a thing. We're trying to solve a problem that may get reproduced 10,000 or 1,000,000 times. And then that's where the problem comes in. So it's strange. Photographers, artists, illustrators are all protected under intellectual property and copyright. You cannot take away those persons' rights. They belong to them. When an artist sells you a piece of work, they're selling you a licensed use, a reproduction of that image. So if I were to go buy a painting from an artist, you make me a painting, right? I buy your painting. I own it. I gave you the money. You're happy. But if that painting were to appear in a commercial, you could then sue the company who used it, or me, whoever is in charge of this thing, because you didn't clear the rights to use that, because you didn't buy the rights to reproduce it in a commercial or a film. And this is why you'll see a lot of times when you're on these reality shows, they pan past things, the background's all blurry. It's blurry because they haven't cleared it, and they don't want to clear it because it's just too much work and too much money. But a piece of design, you design a logo for a client, they pay you $500. You'll never come back and get money for that thing. That's it.
Right. Do you think that, do you ever price anything in the way where it's like, because I know a lot of people nowadays, let's say they're doing like a merch design or a piece of album art or something, they price it in the way that this is the license for that specific thing, but you have to pay for more licenses if you want to reproduce it on merch or use it in the physical packaging design and things like that. Do you still think that is like the proper approach to kind of protect yourself in getting you paid, but also giving the client more freedom to like recreate things?
See, I think it's a good concept to talk about. I'm being a realist here. I don't think it'll ever happen. That's an industry-wide practice. And I'll tell you why. Illustrators, photographers, and artists align with the mentality that I'm an artist. I have a unique vision in the world. I'm going to capture something, and through my hands, through my artistry, I'm going to make you a very limited thing. And built into this is a whole industry that bands together to say, this is how we look at our work, and we're going to license it to people who want to use it. So it's based on usage. It's based on countries. It's also based on exclusivity, right? Or exclusivity. So that's how they base the price. But for whatever reason, and I think probably it started in advertising where they needed someone to do something, a mechanical reproduction or to put together a layout. It was just a task. You're not an artist. You're called a production artist. There's a whole team of you in the other room. And because we have money, we're going to make sure that you sign a work agreement that says this is all work for hire. That means all of what you create, your intellectual property, is theirs. They own it by right. Like if you work for Disney, anything that you do within the residual hours of your work, they own. So you can't come back and say, I came up with an idea for a show. Like, yeah, cool, we own it, right? Because you're doing something with the security of a job, and it's very commercial and licensed that way. And so how many designers do you think exist in the world? A couple 100,000 people, maybe 1 million? What do you think?
Yeah, I guess depending on what you consider, like from anyone to like someone that is working like consistently, somewhere between, hundreds of thousands to the other end, probably millions for sure.
Yeah. So if you're a professional working designer and you hear this message, how many people are willing to say, we will band together, form a union, and say from this point forward, we're going to hire lobbyists to work on our behalf to treat design, a logo, a website, just like an illustration and a photo. We want to be able to own this and only license it to people. Now, in my lifetime, and I've been working now for 25, 26 years, right? I've only come across less than 5 people who are in the commercial space who've been able to license their work. 5 people. So in order for this to work, a vast majority of us would have to agree and then band together, but we won't, because you know why? We're too strong-headed. We're too self-interested. And so we will not agree to do anything because we're like, well, that's your problem. I need to go put money on the table right now, and I'm not willing to do that.
Right. Yeah. It sucks because I idealistically, I agree with that. And I know a lot of people who are attempting to do what you're saying by getting this kind of to become a movement and putting different rules into place for this creative practice. But it's different to say you're down with that, and then when you're met with an opportunity that you could get paid for, and then you want to argue with the client about the licensing, a lot of times it doesn't work out, and then you get kind of jaded and you're like, well, I'm not going to try that again, Right. That's what usually happens.
I mean, imagine this scenario. Client comes to you and says, I need a logo. You're great. Before I go too far, I just want to let you know, I don't make logos for hire. I license them to you. Like, what do you mean you license? Well, I'm going to design you a very special custom mark that for every application that you use it for, you're going to need to pay me a royalty for. And they're like, well, how does that work? So we're going to pay you to do something. And then we need to use this for all different kinds of purposes. And you're saying that every time we use it for something new, I got to call you and pay you more. You're like, yeah, that's how it works. That's how licensing works, right? And like, well, screw you. I'm going to call 100, 200 other people, and they're all going to agree to do this and see you later. Right. And you're sitting there thinking, I'm totally screwed. This is why this only works if a vast majority of designers agree that we will not accept any work. So they have no option.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's what would have to happen, because I see that in a less extreme example with where we see a lot of people devaluing design in terms of what they charge just in general, like, $50 for an album art or like $20 for a logo or whatever. It's really hard to justify prices to a client, even when they're well-deserved, when you have people doing that, whether or not they're good enough or not. And the most dangerous thing I see is some of those people charging those prices are fucking good. It's not that they just suck and they don't know what they're doing. Like,
right.
They are good. And that's what scares me. Like, how can you, what's going on? Like, why are you doing this? But I guess that's their problem, I guess. Can't really do anything about it.
Right. And I'm glad you said that, because it was easy in the past to dismiss the people who would do things for $5 or $50 as just being hacks and no good. And the reality of it is with the internet, and we talked about this, first of all, they have access to tools and education that they didn't have before in very remote areas where someone who earns $50 is the hero for the family.
Yeah.
And they're supporting like 5 other people. And so we can't really blame them. And it turns out with enough training, with someone who has an eye for design, they can actually make really beautiful things. So the only insurance that you have against that happening to you in your industry is you have to become the most well-known person doing it, or at least one of the top 10, because then people are not paying you for your skill in the craft anymore. They're paying because they want to be associated with the name brand person, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about it, it's like, we can get Ralph Lauren to design our uniforms. Oh my God.
Right.
Versus Joe Schmo. Well, that's a big deal, isn't it? And so what we start to realize is, especially in developed countries, when money is not the deciding factor of how we make decisions. And so what we're doing is we're buying prestige. We're buying a sense that we got a Ralph Lauren original, or we got an Issey Miyake piece, or whatever the style and the brand. So we want to be connected to this because it gives us social status, and that's worth more than the thing itself.
Right. Yeah, that's well said. I noticed there were about 5 minutes over. You had time for an hour, so I don't want to keep you too long, but I just wanted to say thank you, Chris. It was really nice finally meeting you, and it was great talking with you, and I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jesse. I enjoyed it.
All right, sweet. Thank you, everyone, and go check out Chris Doe, Futur, all that good stuff, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and we'll see you next time. Peace out, everybody.